Well, let's start a conversation about these issues. Here to do that, two members of the Senate Taxes Committee that heard the stadium testimony this week. Senator Julianne Ortman chairs the Senate Taxes Committee. She's a Republican from Chanhassen. Here, too, Senator Ann Rest, the New Hope DFLer, is a former chair of the House Tax Committee. Thank you both for coming down. Now, the $876 million in the surplus, Madam Chair, you would take a law change to redirect that money. That's already spoken for in state law.
It is already directed towards the cash flow account and our reserve account. So there isn't even money to begin to pay back the school shifts. So it's already accounted for.
Would you anticipate a law change that might move it somewhere else, at least part of it?
Well, it's happened before, and I'm sure there will be lots of folks with some ideas about what to do with that money. But in my view, it should stay in the reserve account. It's the best way we can restore the long-term economic health of the state is to make sure we have a reserve. It will help us to increase our credit rating to bring it back up to where it was prior to the end of session.
Does this, though, open the door to maybe some property tax relief somehow?
Well, first of all, I think it's we shouldn't be talking about a surplus. What we have coming up for the end of next year is a balance. It's all money that's been spoken for, as Senator Ortman said, and it's not going to be. It's not extra money that's available, in my mind, for anything at this point. However, if the February forecast is as rosy about that balance as this forecast has been, then certainly the tax chair can look at reallocating priorities for those dollars. But I think we've been through an extremely rough time in the last 8 years, and we should be grateful for what we have seen at this point, the result, without going into all the reasons for it, quite frankly, and let the law work its way. And that is the cash flow account at $350 or whatever it is.
It depends on what happens in February.
And it might be worse.
Yes, the February forecast is what y'all really watch.
Well, right, but as I was saying, we still have a short-term cash flow issue. This helps us long-term, and with the structural deficit, it actually was reduced. The 2014-15 balance carry forward was a $1.9 billion structural deficit. This brings it back down to $1.3 billion. So long-term, it looks good, but still we don't have any cash to make any real adjustments here because it's spoken for.
When people were so surprised at this surplus, and I'm wondering, the forecasting seems off because you all were expecting a deficit, and now we're talking about a surplus. We're talking about big swings here. Is there any way to smooth this out? Because it's difficult for folks like you to actually try to craft a budget.
Well, I think one of the keys for understanding this projected surplus is what happened in 2010. These are all the tax revenue increases are due to 2010 tax liability. And if you remember, in 2010, there was a big debate in Washington about the Bush tax cuts, whether or not they would be extended or not, and that waited until the very end of the year to pass. Well, the projections are only current law. So at the time, people were actually taking advantage of a lower tax rate in 2010, fearing a penalty if those Bush tax cuts didn't pass in 2011. So there were a lot more transactions in 2010, and that's why you see increased revenues to the state based on 2010 tax liability.
And they were capital gains.
Capital gains transactions, right.
And fewer people were on medical assistance than you all thought there were going to be.
There were fewer people, and also there were other savings in medical assistance, some of which were I would call them pass-through from the federal government based on the Affordable Care Act.
Would you say, because you've been in the legislature a long time, is there a better way to try to budget based on these forecasts?
Well, one certainty about the forecast, and I know that Julianne would agree with me, is that they're always wrong. No matter what, they're always wrong. But we do need to, we do our budget balancing based on the latest information that we have. Some of that is unanticipated. One of the things that's in this forecast is that the payroll tax deduction that's currently being debated in Washington is going to continue. Well, what if it doesn't? The February forecast would reflect that, and in addition, the February forecast will also reflect this year's holiday spending, which has been really good so far.
Now if there is a surplus in February, does this make it easier to deal with the Viking Stadium issue? Since you're not worrying, you don't have to say, we have to deal with the budget deficit first.
Well, I think folks should maybe think about the Viking Stadium a little bit differently. If we're talking about $300, $400, $500 million for a stadium, and we are not there yet, but if in the proposals that we've been looking at, they've considered a state contribution of somewhere in that range, you would be talking about bonding it. So the actual biennial cost would be about 1/10 of 1% of our biennial budget. It's a very small amount. It would be whatever is necessary for the debt service. So I don't think we're talking about anything other than bonding to help the Vikings.
As part of that, the forecast assumes about a $700 million, give or take a few million.
For bonding projects.
Bonding projects. I certainly wouldn't support those dollars going for a Viking Stadium, though.
And given, as Eric says, that February forecast, might it be easier to pass a bill this session? Or do you all just want to get out of Dodge and run for re-election without messing with the Vikings?
I think, frankly, it's going to be hard to reach any kind of agreement with the governor. And we don't have to, frankly. The economic forecast has set it up so that we don't need to pass a new budget. We're all good to go. The reserve puts us in a very good place going forward, and we don't need to. So the question is the governor going to be willing to negotiate in goodwill or with good faith? And I don't know. That remains to be seen on any major issue before the legislature.
Issue, yeah.
Okay.
Thanks very much. Good to see you.